Hi, I'm Sherry McKay. I'm a white woman worship leader, and I'm leading my church in a transition from monocultural worship to multicultural worship. I want to share with you a quote from Teresa of Avila, the Carmelite nun, and I'm going to read this off my laptop here. She said, "Know that even when you are in the kitchen, our Lord moves among the pots and pans." Today I want to talk about cross-cultural cooking, and in my journey into multicultural worship, one thing I decided to do was to get beyond the walls of the church and the context of the worship service and connect with people from different cultures in my congregation in their homes and invite some of them into my home. So my first cross-cultural experience was with my friend Yetunde from Nigeria. And I asked Yetunde if she would teach me how to cook plantains, which are awesome. If you've never eaten plantains, you should definitely try this. Now, the ironic part of this whole idea is that I am not very good at cooking at all. So it's just an irony that this is a path that I chose to pursue, but it kind of makes it fun, makes the journey fun. So Yetunde and I set up a time, and she invited me to come to her house for this experience of cooking plantains. And the first thing we did when I arrived is we got in my car and we went to the Caribbean market. And Yetunde lived, she's since moved, but she lived in the north side of Baltimore, northwest part of Baltimore. And she took me to the Caribbean market. And she let me know before we walked in that there were probably some smells that I was not used to. And it was really interesting because she, we had some things in our hands, everything. She started taking, I had a bag in my hand. She took my bag and she's starting to carry things for me, which I wasn't really used to. And all of a sudden I realized I'm already transitioning into a different cultural setting. And she informed me that in her culture, that the younger women, and Yetunde is much younger than me, she said the younger women often carry things for the older women as a means of respect. And it was just part of her culture. And so she's carrying some things and items that we had, and we go into the market, and Yetunde is usually, she's just such a sweet spirit and humble person, and she's not one to be gregarious or put herself out there, so to speak. And it was really neat in this experience. She kind of like took the lead and say, okay, I'm going to share this with you and show you, and I'm going to lead the way. And so we walked in, and we went into the Caribbean market. And it was really interesting because there were fruits and vegetables and all kinds of things I had never seen before. I didn't know what they were. And she walked me around the store and shared with me what the different fruits and vegetables were and seasonings and that sort of thing. I was definitely not their normal customer. And I could feel just in the room that people were watching me. And I knew that not that I didn't belong, I just knew that I was a little bit out of place. And that was kind of like a mental note to me, to think about what it might be like in some settings that I'm normally in, and for someone who is not a white person or someone who's maybe immigrated from another country, when they enter a space that is not familiar. It helped me to have a window into how they might feel, and how to navigate a store that has a lot of things that you're not familiar with, and so forth. So that was just kind of interesting. And so Yetunde and I went, and she showed me the plantains, and if you're cooking them that day, you want to get them in this level of ripeness. They need to be more ripe. If it's going to be a couple days. She showed me just different levels of ripeness and how to select them. And so we selected some plantains, we purchased them, and then we went back to her house and cooked in her kitchen. And her husband and children were there, which was really great. because they're such a fantastic family. So got to spend some time with them and cook while everybody was around. And one of the takeaways or interesting things I learned, although I did learn how to cook plantains, and they were wonderful, and I love them. And she gave me a bunch to take home with me. One of the things that was a takeaway for me is the oil that she cooks with. I have in my kitchen a thing of Wesson oil like this big. I don't know how many ounces it is. Maybe it's 24 ounces or something like that, 16 ounces, 24 ounces. Yetunde had a giant jug that was like, it looked like a commercial-sized jug of oil. And I was really surprised. I'd never seen someone with that much cooking oil. And she explained to me how in the cooking process, she had a can by the stove. And what she does is she cooks, and then the oil that's left over in the pan, she pours into a can and she reuses it. And she reuses it over and over until it is reduced or just not too much other stuff in it. It's not good to use anymore. But it really gave me a sense of how I kind of waste things. I have a lot of single-use products in my home. It just gave me a different sense the more we talked about the oil and how she uses and reuses and conserves her oil. It made me think about the ways that I don't really conserve. And I think the spiritual connection is that of stewardship. And that's something that we talk about in church contexts. We talk about stewardship. And maybe stewardship, when you're in a multicultural setting, is about more than just finances. That there's a variety of resources that maybe as in the American culture or US culture that we don't often, we just have so much. We just have so much, and we have a lot of convenience. And so maybe when we're planning church events or we're doing things together, that's something to consider is, or be aware of, is how we all think about stewardship. So that was a wonderful experience. And after cooking with Yetunde, we said goodbye, lots of hugs, because she was actually moving the next day to Texas. And I miss her family so much. But I was off to my friend Victoria's house. And my friend Victoria is originally from India. And her family is also just like an absolutely wonderful family. And we've had a lot of opportunity to connect over the years and spend time together. And I've been invited to their home for different celebrations like birthdays and so forth. So I went to Victoria's house, and Victoria was going to teach me how to cook lemon rice. Now, what we did a little bit differently at Victoria's house is she opened up her pantries. And I got to tell you, I had no idea what anything in her pantry was. There were dried beans, all these different kinds of beans, but they all had different names than what I was accustomed to. There were more varieties of rice than I knew even existed. And what she did is she took the different kinds of rice and the different kinds of beans and different things, and she would pour them out on a tray and separate them and explain to me how this rice is used or how this bean is used or this other product is used. And she had everything so organized in her pantry. If you opened my pantry, you would see like boxes of cereal and canned goods. And it was really interesting to look in her fridge and to see her pantry and to see how different it was from mine. So that was really, really interesting. We spent a lot of time just going over all that. And then we made our lemon rice, which was amazing and very fragrant and a little spicy. She even tried to de-spice it a little bit for me, but it was still a little bit spicy, but that was really great. And then after we cooked the lemon rice in Victoria's kitchen, then we went to the Asian market, and that was about 5 or 6 miles away. We went to the Asian market, and again, this one was huge. When I went to the Caribbean market with Yetunde, it was just a small one-room market. Going to the Asian market, this particular one was massive, bigger than our regular grocery stores. It's probably like the size of a Walmart or something. And talk about the variety of coconuts and all kinds of things, honestly, again, that I never knew existed. Really strange looking vegetables and fruits that I would have no idea what to do with. And then the aisles of packaged products. Again, just aisles and aisles of things that I was completely unfamiliar with. And honestly, by the end of the shopping trip, I felt exhausted. I was so tired. My brain had been processing so many new things all day long. I was really feeling that fatigue. And it made me think, I got to keep this in mind too, that when people from other cultures are immersing themselves into this American culture, that it can be exhausting, it can be tiring. There's a fatigue factor, and we just need to be considerate about that. And that's one of the reasons I think that providing multicultural experiences in our churches is really helpful, because it gives people not only a sense of welcome, but it helps them just to let down for a moment and experience something that's familiar, something that they know, and communicating spiritual truths in that kind of context, I think, is really helpful. It's a great way to love one another. My final cross-cultural cooking experience was with my friend Judy and her husband Ernie. I invited them over to my house so that Judy could teach me how to cook greens. Judy and Ernie are African American, and at a lot of the funerals or special things at our church where we have potlucks or whatever, Judy will often bring her greens, which are a big hit at our church. So I wanted to learn how she does that, what her secrets are. And it was great to have Judy in my kitchen and Ernie. And at the same time, my dad and my stepmom, they live with me in my home. And so they were part of the experience. And we cooked greens, and I got to hear the stories that go with these cultural foods that people have grown up with. And so that was really special. And then I ran to Popeyes and got some fried chicken and brought it home, and we ate a full meal with our greens. And then after that, Judy and Ernie stayed for an hour and a half, 2 hours, singing hymns in the living room, and we just sat and we sang. And so we shared that gift of music in my home, to the point where we had to call it. We had church the next day. And so there's just a lot of things personal things that end up being shared when you enter into someone's home and into their kitchens, and you get the real stories of life and the connections that happen there. So cross-cultural cooking, it's a gift that we can access, because worship really goes beyond the worship service. And if we're going to lead effectively in our worship services, we have to know our people. We have to know them, and we have to have personal relationships with them, and we need to be worshiping and experiencing God together outside of the four walls of the church. So I hope this experience is something that you might want to try with someone who maybe prepares foods that are different from the ones you eat. So thank you for watching this episode, and please subscribe to this channel and watch more episodes as we talk about this journey of transitioning from monocultural worship to multicultural worship.